Hi, this is Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. And today, we're going to be talking about how to land more clients as a mixer, producer, engineer, anyone who's working in music, providing a service. And this one's inspired by a listener question. You want to ask me a listener question? You can. If you're on the YouTube version, just type a comment down below. I do try to read every single one that comes through. I respond when I can. And also, you can shoot me an email over at podcast@sonicscoop.com. This particular listener question that came in, it just reminded me of so many other questions I've gotten in the past, and I wanted to read it for you. We'll call this guy Frank because it came in through email, not publicly, and I didn't ask him if I could read the question, so we'll call him Frank for now. If you want to mention in the comments down below who you are, you're welcome to, but you can remain completely anonymous. He says, "Hey, Justin, hope you're well. I saw your very interesting video about making money in music that I did recently." He says, "I wish I could do more work as a score mixer. Totally random. Would you have any suggestions on how I could get started? I tried reaching out to other composers in my network offering free sample mixes. It doesn't seem to work. Not sure if I should try Fiverr or some other similar website. Any advice you have is welcome." This is a place that I was in not too long ago. I mean, when I was starting my career 15 years ago, a little bit more than that actually, with no clients, I was asking the very same questions. And it seems that not a couple of weeks will go by without me getting a similar question, whether in the comments or whether in my email. So I know it's something that a lot of people are struggling with. You're taking mixing or producing or recording or whatever services you do, composition, really seriously, but you seem to be having trouble landing paying clients for that kind of work. How do you get them? How do you get better paying ones? How do you get more of them? How do you start getting this work if you don't already have a lot to show for what you've been doing? We're going to go into some clear strategies on all that and a whole lot more in this week's episode. Let's get into it. Before we do, the only thing I got to do is the briefest of shout outs to our sponsors. New sponsor on the podcast this month, iZotope, making some of my favorite plugins around. I've done some videos in this channel, one where I mix an entire song using nothing but the iZotope Music Production Suite Pro subscription bundle, and I also have a video where I master a whole bunch of tracks using nothing but iZotope Ozone. On my real masters that I do every day, you'll always find me using at least one or two, if not more, Ozone modules on them. I use their stereo imager all the time, love their dynamic EQ, love their maximizer, and so many more. Big fan of the RX Restoration Suite as well. We got a special deal for you. If you want to get 10% off any of their plugins, you can go over to iZotope.com/SonicScoop. That's iZotope.com/SonicScoop. Enter the code SonicScoop10 at checkout for 10% off any plugin you buy from them. Or if you want a 30-day free trial of their Music Production Suite Pro bundle instead of the usual 7-day free trial, you can also get that over at iZotope.com/SonicScoop. Last couple of quick mentions. SoundToys, making some of my favorite creative mixing effects in the known universe. So much fun to work with. Check them out. Anything they make for free for 30 days over at soundtoys.com. Last but not least, if you want to sponsor this podcast, the best way to do it, sponsor yourself. Check out one of our full-length courses like Mixing Breakthroughs, which will teach you to mix faster, better, with more creativity and confidence than ever before. Check it out with a money-back guarantee over at mixingbreakthroughs.com. Or if you prefer to learn everything that I know about mastering, check that out over at masteringdemystified.com. All right, let's get right into the meat of this week's episode. How to land more clients as a mixer, composer, mastering engineer, music producer, whatever it might be. There's really two big things that we have to talk about. The two biggest things to getting hired are real and network. And I can just basically end this episode now. Thanks for being here for the whole sponsor section. We're done. No, I can go into a lot more detail, but those are the two things you have to focus on the most. There are a couple of additional components that are going to help you support both of these other activities. For instance, when it comes to networking, your soft skills, your social skills, how well you are in communication, whether in person or via email. There's also, to support your real, the other stuff you have going on, your website, your web presence, perhaps your ability to create proposals for prospective clients. We'll talk about a lot of that stuff. But there are really two things to focus on your side, which is real and network. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But there's also two big things to focus on the client side. For an example of this, let's revisit that email we read at the beginning of this episode, where this person who writes in, who's actually a good composer in his own right and has been doing a good job mixing his own stuff, there's one very telling sentence in there. He writes, I tried reaching out to other composers in my network, offering free sample mixes. It doesn't seem to work. And right there, that other potential problem jumped out at me of the two things on the client side, as well as getting the two things right on your side. Two of the things on the client side is every single client that you evaluate, prospective client, you got to think about two things. One, do they have the ability to pay? And two, do they have the willingness to pay? This was a framework that seems so simple, but when it was presented to me, and I started looking at all client interactions through this lens of asking those two questions, do they have the ability to pay and do they have the willingness to pay? All of a sudden, the way that I thought about my interactions with potential clients totally transformed. And all of a sudden, I could find myself not ending up with a gig from a prospective client interaction and feeling fine about it, because the answer to one of those two questions was no. So here's an example. You are a film composer who's kind of at the entry level, trying to get your stuff placed for the first time. Maybe you've gotten a few placements. Maybe you're starting to do some really good sounding work that you're really confident with. Maybe you're just starting to get some of them accepted to music libraries. Maybe you've just placed a few of your first commissioned pieces of work in some actual film or video production. But think about the other composers who are in the same place as you, who might be in your network, who are on your same level. Do they have the ability to pay you? Some of them might. Some of them might not. Some of them might not be able to justify paying any more in this music hobby/side hustle that they're trying to turn into a career. Maybe they don't have more money to throw out to have someone else to do the mixing work, so they're going to do it themselves. But then there's also the question of willingness to pay. Even if some of them do have the ability to pay, maybe they're trying to do the same thing that you are. Maybe they're trying to say, hey, in addition to composing, I'd also love to see if I could do mixing work and get my mixing chops to come up, or make myself a more cost-effective composer to hire. So I want to get good at mixing. So even if they have the ability to pay you, do they have the willingness to pay? And as soon as you start asking that question about every potential interaction you have, when you start getting no's, because the answer to one of those questions is no, you don't have to feel bad about it. It's not like there's something wrong with you. They would have said no to basically anybody offering them the same thing. And this is an important thing to recognize. Why is it an important thing to recognize? Well, if you're trying to be in the music business as a freelancer or as a studio owner, you're a little independent business person now. And one of your jobs is sales, networking, connecting with clients, closing projects. It's an unsexy word to use that we don't use a lot in the music business, but what you're doing is sales. And the reality of sales is that most prospective people you're going to sell to say no. And the biggest way to get your success rate to go up and your yes rate to go up is to get your no rate to go up. If you want to get more yeses, you need to go out and try to get more no's. Because to some degree, it is a bit of a numbers game. Now, this does not mean you have to be a used car salesman about selling your services in music production and mixing and composition, whatever you do. You don't have to go out and say to everyone, hey, do you want to buy my services? Do you want to pay me money? Hey, I've got something. Would you like to buy it? You don't have to be pushy. But it means that you do want to start creating more interactions than you already are. And when you do this with the long game in mind, if you reach out to people with a genuine desire to be helpful and to figure out how you can improve their lives, almost none of them are going to fault you for it. Maybe they will if they're in a really bad mood, or maybe they will if they're secretly your competition. But generally speaking, if you're reaching out to people because you have a service that you could offer them that might actually make their lives better, easier, make their work in music, make their own projects turn out better or be easier or be more cost effective, if you're coming there offering that to people, you're trying to give them something. And yes, you get paid, you get something back in return. But if you're leading with that idea of I'm here to give you something, and hopefully one of my services that I can do, mixing for you, mastering for you, writing tracks for you, guesting on your tracks, being a session player for you, if you're coming to them with the intent of helping them in that way, that's extremely useful. Now, what you might find out from these conversations is they don't need what you got. And maybe what you've got is, I want to try mixing for people. And maybe they don't want that because they're trying to learn to mix themselves. You'll probably run into that a lot. So there's two additional things that you can do here as part of this networking process. One of them is say, oh, you don't need my service. Like, what do you need help with? And they might say that they need help with recording or mastering or promoting their tracks, publicity. What if you knew someone who worked in one of those fields that you could refer them to? All of a sudden, you've helped someone, asked for nothing in return, enriched their lives, made it better. The next time you come reaching out to them, are they going to think about you positively or negatively? Or the next time they come across someone who's looking to get the service provided that you offered, maybe they'll tell them your name, even if that person never ends up being a client for you ever. So that's thing number one that you can do. Try to be genuinely helpful. Try to find out what people really need and give them referrals to people who can do that for them. And as you have conversations with each of these people, you'll find out more about the services they provide. And if they seem like decent people, maybe you can recommend them to other people in the future. And if that's one of the things that you're doing, connecting and recommending, and all of a sudden people got gigs because of you, the likelihood of them sending future gigs to you is a lot higher. And all it takes is to go out there with the idea of genuinely helping people in their projects. It's not just about what you're getting, and listening to them about what they actually need. Now, the other thing that you can do here, when you find out that the person you're talking to doesn't actually need or want your services, and you keep hearing again and again that there's a particular service that they do want help with, maybe you could start learning and offering that service. Now, maybe that seems a little crazy to you and like a little bit of a stretch, but that's how I got into mastering. Early on in my career, I was into recording and producing. I was doing a lot of that. And then I decided I was going to make the switch into mixing because I was actually getting paid more money for fewer hours of work mixing. So I did mostly focus on that for a while. Also doing live sound on the side and teaching audio courses in some colleges. So I had multiple streams of revenue, but my main focus as a professional was first recording and producing, then it turned into mixing. And then after a while, it got harder and harder for me to land the same kinds of mixing clients I was at the same kind of rates that I was. And that was often because a lot of the kinds of clients who I would have been mixing for in the past, those kinds of clients started to want to learn to mix for themselves. And in addition to that, my friends and network started to be different. When I was younger and I was in college and playing in bands and going out to shows and concerts a lot, most of the friends I had were musicians. So I was more likely to run to people who were musicians and they wanted help recording and mixing. But then as I got further and further along in audio and I started writing for SonicScoop and all these other publications about audio engineering, my friends and network started to be other audio engineers. So that was an even bigger part of it, that now I wasn't networking and friends with musicians so much, I was networking and friends with audio engineers. And most of those audio engineers weren't going to call me for mixing work because they were trying to get mixing work. But what happened again and again is people would say to me, "Hey, Justin, do you ever consider mastering? Would you master my tracks for me?" I'd say, "No, I'm a mixing guy. I'm just trying to mix. Do you want me to mix for you?" And they're like, "No, I'm trying to mix too." And they said, "I could really use advice on a good mastering engineer." And people would actually come out and ask me like, "Hey, do you master stuff? I could really use someone to double check my stuff. I know you're a little more experienced than me. Would you master my stuff?" And I would tell people no, because I'm not a mastering guy. I'm a mixing guy. And then I said no for long enough that I said, wait a second, maybe there's something that other people in my social network and my friends and the universe knows that I don't know. Maybe there's like something out there that's smarter than I am that keeps on pointing me in this direction. When I go out looking for mixing work with my current network, I'm getting the cold shoulder more and more frequently because of who my current network has become. But without even trying, people are asking me to master stuff. So I'm like, why don't I stop saying no and start saying yes? And then all of a sudden, business picked up dramatically again, just because I was offering a service that made sense for the kind of network I now had and for the kinds of developments that were happening within that network. So basically, you've got two choices here around network. One of them is start offering services that your currently existing network actually wants and needs, or two, grow and change your network. So if you want to do more recording, you're going to have to start hanging out with fewer recording engineers and more people who want recordings done. If you want to do more work as a producer, again, you're going to have to start hanging out with fewer producers and more artists to a degree. And if you want to do mixes, you're going to have to find maybe more producers who are uncomfortable or not desiring to mix their own stuff instead of just hanging out with other people who want to mix or are mixing engineers. And if you want to do mastering, maybe you should think about having a network of mixing engineers who want a more experienced mastering engineer to check their work and help sweeten it further. Same kind of thing for someone who is a film composer. You could specialize in mixing and try to offer mixing services to film composers. But the likelihood of film composers at the entry level being your clientele, probably not going to work. There might be some other service you could do for them. Maybe you're really killer at orchestration. Maybe you have a great bounty of sound libraries that you've collected and you can help take their MIDI files and run them through better sound libraries, not just mixing services. Maybe there's other tiers of stuff that you can offer. Or maybe if you really do want to start doing mixing and you want to do it for film composers, you've got to start networking with film composers who don't have the time or interest to mix their own stuff because they're at a significantly higher level. But there, it's going to take some work and it's going to take some time to develop both the skills and the credibility to deliver for those kinds of clients who are more likely to actually want to pay for that kind of work. And that brings us to the other big thing you can change about yourself, which is your reel. How good is the quality of your work that other people can hear? Do you have a reel up there that is going to say, my mixes sound shockingly good, particularly for the kind of value that I'm offering you? Or maybe I have testimonials you could argue are part of your reel. People who've written about how great of a job I did mixing their project. It's going to be hard to build the testimonials if you can't even get people to accept free work from you. So a good way often to do that, particularly if you are a composer, if you are a producer, if you are an artist, is get really amazing at mixing your own work, if mixing services are what you want to offer. Now, there are other secondary things you can do. For instance, you can support your networking efforts by improving your soft skills. And to be honest, I landed some of my first ever kind of recording and production clients, not by having a reel, not by having testimonials, but just kind of by being confident and having the gift of gab and kind of faking it until I made it. But some of that confidence came from the fact that I actually knew how this stuff worked and I knew what I was doing and I had been studying a while and doing it on my own stuff. But it was not actually my reel and testimonials that got me my very first clients. It was brazen and probably to a degree unjustified confidence. And that little bit of fake it till you make it and gift of gab stuff can work. If you're not a big talker, just having good presentation skills, knowing how to communicate effectively in very few words, that's a skill that I could learn to do better. How many minutes are we into this podcast? So I think you get the idea. You can potentially support your networking efforts with these other ancillary things that you can focus on in a secondary way. Just like with your reel, you can support it in a secondary way by collecting testimonials, by having a good targeted website. If you have a website right now, chances are there's a million mistakes you're making with it. I know my websites to this day have millions of mistakes on them and things that I can do better. But one of the big things that people often don't get together at first is they don't really have their niche identified on their website, and they don't really think about whether or not their actual material on their website and the angling of their website actually appeals to the kinds of people who are going to buy their services. Like you see a lot of producers and engineers making a website to impress other producers and engineers who are probably never going to buy their services. Or they're making a website to convince some potential employer who doesn't really exist and who they're not really courting that they're a good professional person, instead of targeting their website at the most likely end client that they're really trying to target. So if you're going to have some type of web presence, even if it's a really simple social media page or Wix site or whatever it is, you've got to think about that angling. Are you a producer who works with singer-songwriters, bringing their songs to life and filling it out with more instrumentation and guiding them through the process of making their first single or the first album? Everything about your website should speak to that client, their needs, their problems, their pain points. Just like if you're mixing or mastering or composing, you want to have this kind of client avatar in your mind. Who are the kinds of people who are the most likely to A, have the willingness to pay, and B, the ability to pay? And how can you sculpt your web presence around appealing to that particular type of person? Now, I'll try to address the question really briefly about other websites, like should you go on something like Fiverr? I've actually never been on Fiverr. I've never seen it. I know what it is. It's a place where people kind of offer services for a very low rate from all over the world. And yeah, if you're having trouble finding people in your own network or creating your own network, doing something like that, I guess could be a way to go. When I was younger, the kind of bottom feeder website out there for trying to search for clients or gigs was Craigslist. And I just never really had a good experience trying to look for potential clients and offer my services on Craigslist back in the day. To be fair, maybe it was different back then because it was like in the Great Recession and there were more people offering services and asking for money than actually wanting services and offering money. Maybe it's different on a site like Fiverr, but my understanding of those sites is it really is a bit more of a race to the bottom. Although I understand there are some people, like a very slim top percent of people who really kind of game those services and figure out how to give people a really kind of efficient, really cost-effective offering, which is a big driving factor on sites like that. And one more thing I should mention about that is going to a site where you're likely to connect with clients who are looking for the lowest possible price may end up helping you improve your skills, but it's unlikely to help you improve your reel or really your network in a meaningful way. So that's something to think about as well. If you need to just get a lot of work coming in, no matter the quality or the value of that work, just so that you can get your chops up and you have more skill building opportunities, then awesome. That could potentially be a way to go. But if you're looking to do that to improve your reel or your network, it might not be the optimal approach. And if you are having trouble with the networking side of things, about meeting people either out in real life or through the internet, then yeah, it could be a good supplement. But my big problem with sites like Fiverr or even site I'm on, SoundBetter, is that those kinds of sites are about owning the relationship. The idea is that Fiverr becomes the website solving problems for people. SoundBetter becomes the website solving problems for people. And you're just a service provider within that framework. You don't own those relationships. I do have a SoundBetter profile. Every once in a while, someone will come to me through SoundBetter, and it's a cool way to interact. There's things about it that are good. They manage the process of payment to make end users feel more comfortable. But I never even end up knowing what the person's last name is or like what their band name is when I master records for them. I'm not building a client relationship. Yes, I've gotten repeat clients through there, but it's just not the same. And there's not the same level of connection. There's not the same level of kind of expanding network by meeting people there. I'd say that a site like SoundBetter and a site like Fiverr is really geared towards solving the trust problem for kind of hobbyists who are putting their toe in the water, who need a service provider, but don't really have a trusted network where they can look for a service provider in music because they don't know that many people in music. So it is potentially good for those people. And I think it's a good business model for those websites. But is it the best business model for you as a freelancer? I would say they're potentially good things to allow you to drum up work early on. But in my experience, sites like that aren't going to help you build your network, which is just as important. So the long story short, TLDL, too long didn't listen version of this podcast is you got to ask yourself 4 questions. How is your reel? And how are the supporting elements of that reel, potentially things like testimonials and the website where that's contained? Do you have testimonials? Is your website laser focused on answering the questions and appealing to the pain points of your ideal target client? And then how is your network, your actual ability to go out there and say, I want to increase my acceptance rate, so I've got to increase my rejection rate. Let's go out there and get some no's, because the more no's I get, the more yeses that I'm going to get. And if I get no's during that networking process, be genuinely curious. Don't stop the conversation there and say, you were a no, you're dead to me, you mean nothing. Ask, what do you need help with? Maybe I can help put you in touch with someone who can help with that kind of thing. And it can also help give you ideas about services that you should be offering in the future that you're not offering right now. You will see patterns emerge if you start doing that. And the other 2 questions are about your clients. You got to ask every time you talk to a new prospective client, does this person have the willingness to pay and do they have the ability to pay? Because if they don't have both, no matter how good your reel is, no matter how good your network is, they're not going to become a client. And you can soften the blow to yourself by figuring out that, hey, the answer is no to one of those things. So I can have the courage to go out and get more no's and build my network in that process of getting more no's. But if the prospective client did have the willingness to pay and the ability to pay, and you still got to know, then it's time to revisit those other 2 things more and more, which is your reel, your network, and the things that support them. The soft skills supporting your networking and the other framework that supports your reel. Well, I hope this one has been useful for you. If you are looking to enhance your skill on the mixing or mastering side of things, that I can help you with. With the career side, I don't have a full-length course yet, but if I get enough requests for them, maybe I will do one of these days, because I have been making my living doing nothing but audio stuff for the past 15 to 20 years. Admittedly, I have a kind of funny path to it where half of what I do is teaching other people about how to do this stuff for themselves. But I have and still can today, if I decided to stop making videos, make a living doing just audio stuff. So these are some of the principles that have guided me and helped me, and some of the things that have taken me way too long to figure out. So don't go kicking yourself if you haven't figured out all this stuff yet. But in the meantime, if you do need to improve your reel, a big way to do that is improving your skills. So if I can help you with that, I'm happy to. Check out one of my full-length courses like Mixing Breakthroughs that will teach you to mix faster, better, more creativity, and more confidence than ever before with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So you have absolutely nothing to lose. Check it out over at mixingbreakthroughs.com. Or if you want to start a completely new service, you can check out Mastering Demystified and start adding mastering to your skill set. Check that out over at masteringdemystified.com, where I'll tell you everything that I know about mastering, again, with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Big shout out and thanks to our sponsors. If you're looking for some tools that you don't have right now, things like the RX bundle that will get rid of all sorts of weird noises from the audio you're working on, check it out over at isotope.com/SonicScoop. Or if you want a great suite of tools for mastering, check out their Ozone bundle. Or if you want a great set of tools for music production, check out their Music Production Suite Pro subscription service. And I can get you 10% off any of their plugins with the code SonicScoop10 or a 30-day free trial to their subscription bundle over at isotope.com/SonicScoop. Last but not least, Sound Toys, making some of my favorite creative mixing effects in the known universe. Such fun stuff to use. Check out anything they make for free for 30 days over at soundtoys.com. Thanks for hanging out with me for this week's episode of the Sonic Scoop podcast. See you next time.